Okay, I think I have a green light. And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a Wednesday stream. Yeah, I don't do streams on Wednesday. The reason, for those who are interested, is why, the reason as to why I'm doing this today instead of tomorrow is because I will be streaming with Trups on this channel, where we'll probably mostly be going over Article 13 getting passed. I'm not best impressed by it. I think I let myself, I think I made myself quite clear on Twitter with regards to what I thought about the whole situation. Why is my background image not centered like... That's weird. How odd. I'm looking at the YouTube link, by the way. I noticed there's like a... Yeah. Oh, another reason I'm streaming earlier is because, and he's in the chat, I will be streaming at 10 with Cog. About Serena Williams? I wonder why it doesn't fit in the window. I'm looking at this and it doesn't, but on OBS it fits in fine. How strange. Doesn't matter. Yeah, the EU does need to be burned to the fucking ground. Cog, I'll give you a wrench. And you can... Oh, I'm not on the right fucking account, hang on. And then you can, you know, shill it when you've got it all sorted out anyway. Oh no, it does. Ha! Okay. Switching accounts apparently corrected the issue I saw on my end. Doesn't matter. So Article 13 passed. There's a bit of a concern, although I'm more uncertain still because I don't quite know how it affects us. I know the Conservatives are quite keen on, well, all of that crap really, aren't they? They're quite happy to punish us in their own little way, and they kind of endorse it. I know Theresa May's a big Euro file, is that it? Yeah. So it should be interesting to see how that plans out. Pans out? Pans out, yes. And yeah, I'll try and talk about that tomorrow if it hasn't been covered to death tomorrow. I at least got to call Jean-Claude Juncker a prick. I haven't been suspended on Twitter for it, so that's good, I guess. Weirdly, for PMQs, Brexit wasn't the focal point, which surprises me a little bit. What with Europe being such a hot topic, you'd think it was. I know that just before PMQ started there was a question, and I really wish they'd include them on the UK Parliament channel, where a Labour MP, I think, asked, what is the government doing to tackle the gender pay gap? That was a genuine question asked before PMQ started. Had this come up in PMQs, of course, we would be talking about it in PMQ, and I'd make it a point to go to that part of the video so that we could laugh at it. To which the government response was something to the effect of, we're making things public, we're doing this, we're trying to tackle it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, load of bollocks. This week, though, it's not Brexit, it's universal credit, which is something... Okay, so I've never been on universal credit. I've been on job seekers allowance. I think of my adult life I've spent 6, maybe 7 years on it. I've been through many different failed programs during Labour and Conservative governments in attempts to get me into work. I think I also was on housing benefit for about 18 months. So I understand why universal credit exists from the perspective of why the fuck do we have all these different systems when one means assessed system could be in place. And I've argued in favour of means assessed things for a while. It's just, well, how this was rolled out didn't. Generally, I don't think you're in a good... If you're going to beta test something, it's probably not best to roll it out on the general public in real terms, as opposed to like video games where, quite frankly, I couldn't give a shit. So yeah, universal credit is the theme. Trying to get PIP, doubt I'll get it. Oh, good luck with that. I'm very much familiar with people having issues getting PIP. Yeah. I know that others have struggled to get their hands on back payments or what was formerly known as working tax credits. Then I know some family I have issues obtaining what is originally deemed to be something they're eligible for, but no longer eligible for, because of other family members, which is odd. You see, yeah, I've heard it is, and I know you, Joe, had to fight for yours as well. Right, so yeah. Oh, and Burko has to interrupt this once. Corbyn gets properly riled in this. If I could have been bothered, I would have made a triggered meme for it.
Questions to the Prime Minister. David Duquette.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because it's fuck off. It's bollocks.
David Duquette.
Thank you,
And the reason why is because she talks about some cricket player and I couldn't give a fuck about them.
Mr. Speaker. I know that the Prime Minister appreciates the significance of fishing communities around the UK, not least my own constituency of Banff and Buchan.
That's a lie. She doesn't give a shit about that.
What steps will my honourable friend take to support our fishing communities during the implementation period, and will she look at ways to support the expansion of the catching fleet, infrastructure, processing capacity and other businesses reliant on the sector?
Only if we leave the EU. Otherwise, we'll probably still be a part of the common fisheries policy. I'm all in favour of, by the way, doing more, but I also know that we need to do more to protect our fish stocks. I know that there are some farmers that have been creating farms solely for fish, but it's been a bit difficult. But as that helps, that does in fact help, we should then be able to expand and do more. But as we know, the Prime Minister's a fan of the EU, so yeah, I can't imagine she'd actually give too much of a fuck about it.
Prime Minister.
I say to my honourable friend that I fully recognise the importance of the fishing industry to his and to other constituencies represented in this House, and I can reassure him that what we want to do is to secure a sustainable and profitable fishing industry that will regenerate coastal communities.
Yeah, okay, so Cog, you've actually raised a point I forgot about. Because of EU rules, if they are a certain size, we're not allowed to. You can throw them back, but they're essentially dead when you throw them back. I agree with the sizing thing, but we should be able to then, if they're too small, they should be immediately thrown back. It shouldn't be, oh, the EU shit. This is where I live. We have a lot of seagulls, and those fuckers go nuts near the fishermen, because they know damn well they're going to throw all the dead fish just straight into the water, and those seagulls have got a free meal, and then they'll just start harassing us because they're dickheads. I might buy an electrified tennis racket if they keep on swooping at me. See which one of them wants to get lucky.
Communities and will support future generations of UK fishermen. What we can do when we leave the EU, it means taking back control of our waters, setting our own fisheries rules, and exclusively determining who fishes what in our seas.
Okay, that's a sly little dig at France, I think, and other countries that, when they don't fill their quotas within their own seas, can then just come and fish in our seas. I get that maybe keeping all fish could be sold, but I think when they're too small, you just can't. There's nothing on them. You may as well just turn them into bait at that point, which actually does work. I've used no joke. I've used mackerel to catch mackerel. How gullible are these shits?
And it's a priority of this government also to make sure we have an innovative, productive and competitive food supply chain, and work to consider the long-term future of all funding programmes that are currently managed by the EU is underway.
So they won't get any funding at all. Oh dear.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You notice there wasn't a plant. Well, there was a plant question, I guess, because it was one that gave Theresa May a chance to, boost things. But usually there's two questions before Corbyn starts asking his stuff. It's just quite unusual to not have a question that challenges her. Maybe the question that was meant for her to challenge her was in fact that earlier mentioned gender pay gap.
To join the Prime Minister in congratulating Alistair Cook on a fantastic achievement, and both teams on what has been an absolutely brilliant series, which I really enjoyed.
I just want to highlight this now because I've never noticed this until now. But I think this motherfucker's trying to copy Peter Davison's Doctor with a plant on his suit. I assume this is in solidarity with the Farmers Union or something, with regards to either Brexit or, I don't know, some other bollocks, really. But still, it's interesting. And actually, in the chat, you mentioned cricket bollocks. Peter Davison's doctor's outfit. Fuck off your update. Peter Davison's Doctor Who outfit was actually inspired by cricket, and he wore a leek on his jacket, as opposed to what looks like corn. No, not corn. Oh, I can't tell what it is. I can't be bothered.
Mr. Speaker, the National Farmers Union.
I think it actually is barley. He just mentioned the National Farmers Union, so I'm guessing so. It's a new thing. Maybe that's going to become the new Labour logo. Fuck.
The Federation of Small Businesses, the National Audit Office, the National Housing Federation, Gingerbread, and the Royal Society of Arts.
Right, so I'm going to say this out right now. When he did this, and I watched this live, I had no idea what he was talking about. I believed when he mentioned the Farmers Union people. I thought he was going to go down the Brexit path. I really did, because I have no idea. Is Gingerbread a company? I thought that was a thing, an edible product. Is that actually a trademarked company? Fuck.
Does the Prime Minister know what these organisations have in common?
Minister!
I don't.
I can tell the Right Honourable Gentleman that what those organisations all have in common is that across a variety of areas of activity, they give excellent service, they promote the interests of those that they represent, and they are bodies with which this government interacts and to which this government listens.
Well, I don't know if the government listens. Well, maybe they do. They just put their fingers in their ears and go, la 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 la, I can't hear you, la la la. Which would make more sense. Okay, something fell off my wall. Fantastic.
Jeremy Corbyn!
I am truly grateful to the Prime Minister for that answer.
Probably because it's one of the very few questions she's actually ever answered.
The first part of which I wholly agree. But what they also have... It's all right, it's all right. But what they also have in common, Mr. Speaker, is that they're telling this government its flagship benefits policy, universal credit, is flawed and failing hundreds of thousands of people both in work and out of work. In 2010, the government declared that universal credit would lift 350,000 children out of poverty. Does the Prime Minister stand by that figure?
Right, I'm not going to let her answer that question. I'm actually going to talk about something first. Universal credit, and I actually have I was going to put up a video for it. But there's a video for a website. I haven't linked it below because I forgot to. But the basic premise for universal credit was that it would replace child tax credit, housing benefit, income support, income-based job seekers allowance, income-related employment and support allowance, and working tax credit. Unfortunately, and this is a system that's supposed to be paid monthly, not twice a month, like some places used to with job seekers allowance, and I think it's twice a month with Scotland. Yeah, for some people in Scotland. It was basically rolled out as a way of trying to put all the different types of benefits under one banner. And I got it. I actually did when I heard about it. I initially thought it was a bit... it sounded like it was going to be a mess anyway. Because benefits aren't paid out at the same time. Each branch pays on a different time, or time frame. So inevitably, when they did eventually roll this out for beta testing, it didn't work so well, with people arguing that it did in fact cause some to have to wait up to 6 weeks to receive payments. And I remember this because it came up in PMQs. Jeremy Corbyn mentioned this, and he mentioned explicit cases, and those cases did prove that it wasn't working in all instances because of this backlog, because they were massively underprepared for such a grand change. Oh, and I did bother to look through and see if I was entitled to any of this shit. No, I'm not. No, I wouldn't want it anyway. I mean, I remember getting working tax credit when I worked, and then I kind of thought to myself, why am I getting paid to work? I mean, besides getting paid to actually work, that is, like, an extra little bit. It didn't make sense to me. And I only got it because I'm told to. My housemates just made me. I did look up certain claims about where is it? Oh, fuck it, I can't find it. It was the relative poverty comment, or the bringing a certain number of children out of poverty. And the problem is, there are two definitions. One is relative poverty, and the other one is absolute poverty. Unfortunately, it's not something that can be proven. Okay, so the government would take the side of absolute poverty, in which case, to an extent, they're actually not in the wrong. Problem is, with the relative poverty, you have factors like wages going down over the last 10 years. But if you're going to say the last 10 years, then you have to admit that they started because of something that happened during the Labour government in 2008. Can anyone remember what that was? Yeah, me too. It was pretty bad. And as far as relative poverty goes, it's such a tricky one, because it's based on the assumption that wages haven't gone up. They if you account for the way wages are now structured, actually they would, if anything, just be considered stagnant. They haven't. It's so irritating. It depends on which goalpost you're using, and I'm looking at fact checkers for this. It's so annoying to go through it, because they actually mention there are some claims he'll make, and I will go through them both when they come up, about wages being lower, real wages are rising, about 1.4 million people spent most of the last decade on out-of-work benefits. It's a mess. As far as whether or not the government managed to reach their goal, I don't think they did, because they fucked this system from the offset. They weren't prepared for it, and it is a good idea. I generally think putting things in one place rather than spreading out loads of different systems, especially as most of us know, most of us Brit fags know anyway, especially, Cog will know this, Joe will know this. There were people during the time of Labour, and they pissed me off so much. I have family that did this. They could live on benefits for the rest of their lives. Hell, at one point, someone did tell my auntie she could just stay on benefits because there was no point in her working. She'd get more money being on benefits. Because there were so many different types of benefits, and there was no cap on it. Well, there is a... No, okay. It's a bit blurry. And so, people were living it. And who was paying for that? Somebody had to... Well, there was a consequence, really, wasn't there? And we know what the consequence was, because it happened in 2010 when the Conservatives had to introduce austerity. I was watching an open house stream, and they were talking about the failings of some countries that decide to print money, all the while unironically not getting it that in 2008 that was exactly what Gordon Brown was doing to try and ease the problem with our currency. So while they're bleating on about other countries, I think it was Poffit, he was bleating on about how America's printing money to fix the problem. Who gives a fuck what America's doing? We did it here and it failed. Okay, try and say this right. Quantitative easing never worked. It didn't work, and it was painful. The consequence of that was that we then, in turn, had to suffer for it. And that's unfortunate. Yeah, okay, wages went down. They did go down, by the way. The Office of National Statistics show it did go down. It started to climb back up after 2014. But those first 4 years were not easy for anyone. I think I was unemployed for 2 of those years. Yeah, it was pretty brutal. But it was quite a difficult time. And another little thing for that was that the way they assessed the wages were not the same methods used now. So a different technique was used to obtain the numbers. So for example, like in 2010, I think they used the median across a few different sectors, but a lot of those different sectors in regions were higher paying areas than what exists now. Using the median when considering living costs in different areas of the country doesn't show any really it's not very accurate. I think I've waffled on for 10 minutes. Shit, I probably should get back on track. My apologies, chat.
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman?
Quantitative easing is, in fact, a fantastic constipation treatment because everyone, the moment they hear it, shits themselves. They know that if they've saved any money, and it's in cash, right, they know that money is now worth about the equivalent to a Zimbabwean $1 million.
We introduced universal credit because we needed a system of welfare in this country which encouraged people into work rather than discourage them.
Yeah, that's a point Theresa May said about encouraging people into work, because there were a lot of people who were just benefit louts. They were just living off in fact, that's a play on for the title of this stream, about the state of welfare, because this country for a very long time was called the welfare state because of how easy it was for people to come here and just live off benefits. They didn't have to do anything, and that I grew up poor. I grew up around a lot of people who liked that, but my mother worked. She worked her ass off, and that kind of mentality to want to get things for myself, I got from her, and that's great. It's a drive, a motivation. I don't want to be on benefits. Who the fuck wants to be on benefits? No one. But people did around that time, and I lay this blame firmly on Tony Blair. His approach to that system was just disgusting. I could probably blame John Major as well, but I don't actually know when half of these benefits things were introduced.
Which made sure that work always pays, and that was a simpler system than the legacy system that we were left by the.
You got a point, actually. You get slightly more for working than if you're on benefits. That's something. Another thing I took issue with benefits, certainly from when I was younger, and still now actually. Even with the benefits cap, there are families who can still live quite comfortably on benefits. It shouldn't be a case that if you can live, even I, when I was on benefits, didn't think it was right that I received more than what my housemates could earn for working. I thought that was quite inappropriate. It should be an incentive to get you to work if you can work, not those that are unable to work. They are a different grouping entirely.
Labour Party. Remember the legacy system of the Labour Party? It meant that we even had individuals being paid £100,000 a year on benefits, all paid for by hard-working taxpayers earning a fraction of that sum.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker,
it was surprising with some of the systems brought into place and the fact that people did do that. There was virtually no accountability. I went trawling through old inquest crap, and there was none. It was quite surprising how people were quick to dust this under the rug. And yeah, prescriptions, I'm very much aware of that crap. I think I pay £9 actually for them. I'm not on benefits though, so I just pay that. And yes, Disco, I'm doing this a day early because I'm streaming with Trups tomorrow, provided he's not dead already.
the Child Poverty Action Group says that far from taking children out of poverty, universal credit will now increase the number of children in poverty.
That depends entirely on the definition of poverty. And this is what pisses me off. Two definitions. Seriously.
Since 2010, 500,000 more children have gone into poverty relative to that time. The government knows this policy is flawed and failing. Their own survey on universal credit found many were in debt, a third in arrears with their rent, half fallen behind with their bills. Does the Prime Minister
just to raise this, I looked at that. A few of the instances that were mentioned were because the dates of when their rent went out, even though that should have come from their benefits, went out on a different day to the date when they received their payment. So it wasn't entirely rent arrears, it was more like just not synced up by a couple of days.
dispute her own government survey or dispute the experience of the claimants.
Prime Minister.
The experience of some of the claimants. Roberta, who said, "My work coach helped to..."
Oh, some cherry-picked quotes here of fantastic experiences under universal credit. Ah, cringe.
Turn my life around. He tailored his support to my situation, and thanks to him, I found my dream job. Ryan, I'm happy with the new universal credit. My work coach has been great. I didn't expect to have a job so soon.
Fuck me, Cog. You can get that much on universal credit? What are you doing slumming it working when you could live like a king? Fuck, I don't know where I'm going with that.
Naeem, universal credit gave me the flexibility to take on additional hours without the stress of thinking this might stop my benefits straight away. We have gone from a situation under the Labour Party where 1.4 million people spent most of a decade trapped on benefits. We are helping get people into work, and that's why earlier this week we saw unemployment yet again at a record low.
Okay, so there are two claims here, and I want to go through both. The first is about the claim is that under Labour, 1.4 million spent most of the last decade on out-of-work benefits. Now, according to 2010 research by the Department for Work and Pensions, 1.4 million were in fact out-of-work benefits in 9 of the last 10 years. So that is true. What was it? If you look at the all out-of-work benefits, and I'm going to quote here from a fact checker I was using, including incapacity benefits, the trends are similar, with around 5 million people claiming benefits in 1999, and that figure was almost the same in 2010. It's fallen under 4 million since then, which is good, which is quite handy. And the second one, which was it? Oh shit, there was a second one. I forgot what it was. Oh, it was the unemployment figure, wasn't it? Where was it? Oh yes, there's a claim made by Corbyn that a large part of growth in employment has been driven by an increase in insecure, precarious work, so 0-hour contracts. However, and this is according to the Office of National Statistics as well as a few other sources, that's not true. It says that doesn't seem to be the case for the UK jobs market overall. I will link this actually in the chat if people are interested in looking at it. Oh, I'm assuming Dibula fucking talked about tea again. Yeah, you deserve that, you cunt. But yeah, on this it will indicate that, where is it? There's a chart halfway down where it shows the overall employment rate, but there are figures for part-time, temporary, and yeah, no, the claim that Labour will make about 0-hour contracts being the root cause doesn't stack up, I'm afraid. And unless you're going to discard the Office of National Statistics as a source, yeah, that one could actually be buried now, to be honest. I grow tired of that one actually as an argument. I'm going to close that universal credit video because I don't need it. So £100 earned and £68 taken off universal credit. Hang on a second. So if I earned £100 and tell universal credit, they take 68p off the... Wow. That's something. I did not expect that. I don't claim any benefits, so I don't understand this system as well as you do. I looked at it today and I was reading it, and as far as I was aware, it seemed like a clever idea. It's just not been implemented very effectively or efficiently.
Mr. Speaker, we are all constituency MPs, and I think most of us are well aware of the pain that universal credit is causing when people come into our advice bureaus. 60% of families facing cuts due to the two-child policy are in work. Yes. Universal credit isn't making work pay, it's taking money away from families and putting more children into poverty.
No, No, we'll let him
The
carry on.
National Audit Office report found that universal credit is creating hardship, forcing people to use food banks, and could actually end up costing the system even more. Yeah. Does the Prime Minister dispute the National Audit Office findings?
Prime Minister!
Oh, crap.
The right honourable gentleman talked about constituency cases.
I had a tab open for that, for the universal credit causing food bank thing. Where is it? Ah, I have it here. Trussell Trust Food Bank use has increased 52% in a year in areas where universal credit has been rolled out, which is correct according to Trust's own research. However, it's difficult to measure the extent that one is causing the other, because there's wider evidence that people have had problems during the rollout and that some have been going to food banks as a result, but also people using it beforehand as well. Yeah. And I think some of this also comes from the Office of National Statistics. Oh dear. So Corbyn is right, more people are using it, but the actual cause, it doesn't quite. I mean, some do, not all. Hashtag not all. God, that's a gormless looking face.
I remember.
Order! We're at a very early stage of the proceedings. We've got a long way to go. The questions must be heard and the answers must be heard. And as usual, I want to get through the order paper. The Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman started his question by talking about constituency cases. I remember the single mother who came to see me as her Member of Parliament when Labour were in government, who told me that she wanted to get into the workplace and provide a good example to her child. But the job centre had told her she'd be better off on benefits. That's the legacy of the Labour Party.
So I recently reached out to somebody who was on the work programme with me, and he recently started an apprenticeship at the job centre. Now, the job centre has since changed. It is nothing like what it was when I was there, or going there as I guess you can call me a customer? No, someone on suicide watch at that point. I mean, you go into the most depressing building in the country and you just want to kill yourself. And he was telling me about new systems they'd actually introduced, where now the advisors, those same advisors who were utterly feckless back then and up till maybe a year ago, they now actually help you. They actually have to help you as well. They have targets, they have to be proactive, they have to help with employers, find employers, contact employers. They have to network and get you into something sustainable, which is, I never expected to ever hear that the job centre was going out of its way now to make a concerted effort to help people. I know that certainly the company I went to, I had to go to for work programme, doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if the work programme itself does. But I remember them being utterly useless as well, to the point when I come to the end of my 2-year stay, I just decided, fuck this shit, I'm just going to declare self-employment and piss off. I did. I think I had also it was a year before I started YouTube, so it was a bit different back then as well. But 4 years strong, still here. I haven't had to go to the job centre either, so there's a consolation. But with the way the job centre's changed now, it's truly astonishing, because I've been to it under both governments before the current change, and I remember how bad it was. It wasn't useful, it wasn't helpful. You go in, use the machines, and then they hassle you, essentially. They make you sign a bit of paper and you piss off and wait for your money for, how was it, 3 days? 3 working days? So if you signed in on a Friday like I did, you had to wait till Wednesday. Fan-fucking-tastic.
Mr. Speaker, my question...
Universal credit greater than Jesus Christ. Alright. And Dibula, you better behave yourself. Just saying.
Was about the National Audit Office. The Trussell Trust backs the NAO. They say that food bank usage in areas where universal credit has been rolled out...
Oh yeah, we covered this. I did jump the gun.
...is 4 times higher in areas than in areas where it has not been introduced. But without resolving any of those failings in the next year, the government proposes to inflict this on another 2 million people. Yeah. As part of that transfer, hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities on ESA, JSA and tax credits will receive a letter telling them their support will be stopped. They will have to make an application for universal credit. Does the Prime Minister think it's the responsibility of the government which is changing the system to ensure people retain the support they need?
I just, before you ask this question, because fuck it, I remember reading their manifesto, and I think he also mentioned a redoing of the benefits system. Now, okay, yeah, you've got to watch the Conservative Party introduce this system, which, yes, some areas did suffer. Although Cog says it's greater than Jesus Christ, so my sisters don't mind it either, actually. I think we have it here. One of them gets it for her children since the father fucked off. But yeah, it's not as bad as he portrays it. It's just where it has been rolled out, where the dates got fucked. People suffered for it, and that was a mistake. The government should own that and just outright apologise. But I want to know what system he would... I'm curious to know what system he would introduce instead of universal credit. Would he simply just go back to the good old days of New Labour? The guy wants to borrow 500 billion anyway, so that sounds like New Labour, doesn't it? Yeah, I bet he won't fix the roads.
Need, or is it down to the individual, many of whom are actually very vulnerable people who need help and support?
Prime Minister!
What the government is doing is delivering a system that does give support to vulnerable people, that encourages people to get into the workplace, because we know that work is the best route out of poverty. But if the Right Honourable...
Well, that's oh, excuse me, that's not true. 1997 was a fantastic time to be on benefits. You could live like a queen. Apparently. According to you and actually a lot of people I grew up with. While my mother was busy scrounging for money to get an Action Man for me for Christmas, my friends had several. Cunts.
Gentleman, if the Right Honourable Gentleman believes that universal credit needed some change, then why, when we made changes, like ensuring that we reduce the waiting days for payment, that we...
Which was from 6 weeks down to, was it 4 weeks or 2 weeks now?
Put in a housing benefit overlap to help people on...
To stop people from being in rent arrears.
Why was it that Labour voted against those changes?
Yeah, and they voted ridiculously against it. That was fucking embarrassing. No answer was given for that, and no explanation either.
Mr. Speaker.
Before he asks, I don't know which question number he's on now, but I know he's going to go off on a hell of a rant soon. And I mean to the point where you have to wonder when he actually asks a question, because he just goes fucking nuts. It's definitely something I might clip and turn into a triggering, because it's so good.
It's Labour that's been speaking up for the poorest in this country. It's Labour that's been challenging this government. It's Labour that wants a decency within our society.
That's not true. And your recent actions, along with deselections of MPs for standing up against you because they sit centre-left as opposed to ultra-left, along with the many different claims of anti-Semitism, some of which are anti-Semitism, not all, of course. Let's not forget here your party is becoming remarkably racist. I know a lot of people who have said they are struggling to find a reason to vote for you, to vote for Labour, because yes, while the media is spinning a few of it, when some of it is, when you delve into all of it actually, some of it does turn up some rather nasty truths about how your party could debatably be anti-Semitic, which doesn't help. I mean, come on, the way I grew up, I should be a Labour voter. I should be, but I can't. I cannot vote for this party. You supposedly stand up for the vulnerable. Right. You stand up for social justice and communism. And you basically backhand people you disagree with. You fob them off. In fact, you said you wouldn't help those MPs who were being deselected because you were too busy dealing with claims of racism against yourself. Right. Right. needs the many. In fact, your slogan is for the many, not the few. Well, you are the few, so why not help the many?
That this government is incapable of delivering.
Mr. Spencer, I always thought you were a good-natured, laid-back farmer. You seem to be a very overexcitable denizen of the House today. Calm yourself, man. Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker...
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know they scrapped crisis loans. I had to get one of those once. I remember that bollocks. That was fucking annoying. Oh, wow. I forgot about those. They were like the legitimate Wonga. Except Wonga's in administration and those loans don't exist. Sucks to be anyone that has a Wonga account.
The mental health charity Mind says there's a real possibility, and I quote, that many people with mental health problems could see their benefits stopped entirely. It is outrageous that
speculation.
Vulnerable people risk losing out because of these botched changes.
Yeah, some were botched. Not all. It was botched. Some were botched. You can't pin all of that on... No, carry on.
The government's Brexit negotiations are an abject failure.
Well, I wouldn't say failure. They're amusing. Okay, yeah, it's a failure. He's got. I'll give him this. The Brexit negotiations, where we're essentially trying to get them to move and budge on things, and they're just bending us over. It's embarrassing. Not that he'd do any better. Barley Boy Corbyn couldn't do any better.
I can see that by the sullen faces behind her.
Am I the only person that really wants one of those barley juice drinks? I want one.
And that's not just the ERG group, it's the whole lot of them. But everywhere you look, Mr. Speaker, this government is failing. 1 million families using food banks, 1 million workers on 0 hours contracts.
Not an indicator of employment being, or the employment lows being affected by that, or being the cause of being so low because of 0 hour contracts. It's not. That's not something. Oh, fucking hell. Carry on. Just get triggered. It's fucking awesome.
4 million children in poverty. Wages lower today than 10 years ago. And on top of that, there's the flawed and failing universal credit. Disabled people risk losing their homes and vital supports. Children forced to use food banks. And the Prime Minister wants to put 2 million more people onto this.
The trigger ring.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is not challenging the burning injustices in our society. She's pouring petrol on the crisis. When will she stop inflicting misery on the people of this country?
Minister!
Yay. I just want to do this. He does this a lot. It's quite great, actually. I really enjoy it, because usually on a sixth question, and there was a bingo thing created by Saki, I think. Was it Saki? Where I had all these different buzzwords and things that would come up in PMQs as a guarantee. One would be me saying bollocks. That's a given. But crisis was the other one. Now I can't remember now. Did Corbyn say crisis during that? Because if he didn't, he should have. It's perfect. But he's really good on his final question. He just even though he gets out of breath every 4 words, he's very passionate, and I love it. Even though about a third of what he said was absolute dog shit and lies. Although, Joe, you're going to be homeless. I mean, I know you have a boyfriend, you have your own place, but nah, fam, you're going to be homeless now. I got a shoebox if you can fit into it. I've got the box that came with my gin a few weeks ago. I've still got that if you want to sleep in that.
The right.
Lol, he said crisis.
The right honourable gentleman talks about challenging the burning injustices. Challenging the burning injustices. That's about setting up the racial disparity audit, which says what do public services do and how do people from different communities in our country, are they treated by our public services. It means saying that nobody in this country should be stopped and searched on our streets because of the colour of their skin. That was me as Home Secretary, never the Labour Party.
Yeah, I never supported racial profiling, but there are trends. It can't be denied. You can try if you want, but just don't bother. But I do tend to agree that racial profiling is really bad.
What we're doing is seeing 3.3 million more people in jobs as a result of our balanced approach to the economy. And what have we seen from Labour over the past few days? Iranian state TV broadcasting no confidence votes against Labour members of Parliament. Police investigating anonymous and threatening letters about the deselection of Labour MPs sent to Labour offices.
It is quite astonishing with regards to this little subject. There have been a number of those made that show those sitting typically centre-left have received multiple death threats, and the silence from this little peanut gallery at the front, the Barley Boys, and Token. It's just astonishing. They don't. I'm assuming Tom Watson's not wearing one in case he might eat it. But it's just astonishing they're not tackling these problems. I don't get it. I don't understand how you, the opposition, while poking holes at the government, which you do quite well, let's face it, it's entertaining, but you yourselves are unable to tackle the actual problems you have, or just try and find a way to fob it off, or then do something remarkably underhanded, which would include bullying MPs into silence. There are people who support you that I noticed have been taking the liberty of bullying Conservative MPs, and I saw one initiate a little protest against Mog, and what the guy who was leading this protest did, Ian Bone, I think his name was, I think I tweeted about this, he decided instead of railing on Mog about the pay of his nanny, who's been in the family for decades, I think, decided to then hassle his kids. And I thought that was that kind of, and then harassing, verbally abusing the kid instead about how disgusting their dad was just really low. But those kind of tactics have become synonymous with a party that has shifted away from what Labour was. I think at one point Tony Blair supported you guys, but now doesn't. How far left are you that Tony Blair doesn't support you? And yet he tends to agree with you on things like Europe. Doesn't matter.
And most shamefully of all, the Honourable Member for Streatham saying that the Labour Party is now an institutionally racist party. That's what he's done to Labour. Just think what he'd do to this country.
Yeah, the accusations of racism, it's quite sad, because a lot of them have, I think it's Duncan Pegg said it. Is that the member? Let me check. Yeah, he's the Labour member for Stretton. Duncan Pegg said that they are institutionally racist. Chuka Amuna, who originally ran for leader actually next to Corbyn and a few other people, but he pulled out after he was outed as being a member of a men's only club. I think he was a member of the Illuminati, I can't remember. But it was quite sad, because he also mentioned it. He's received death threats. Pegg inevitably received them. Anyone that speaks out about the anti-Semitism, especially Jewish ones as well. I know that, I can't remember what her name was. She wrote an article where she listed, she's a Labour MP as well, she mentioned all the instances of anti-Semitism. Now I agree half of them weren't, but there were some that were quite clearly anti-Semitic, and I think her nan was, I think she was killed in the Holocaust. She herself being Jewish and telling their party she's a member of it, that they're anti-Semitic, and that the reaction was just ridiculous. Anyway, let's move on. I know that that's the end of Corbyn's questions, so we're going to try and get to Ian Blackford, Touchy Touchy Paper Man.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order! No gesticulation is required, Mr. Brake. Calm yourself. You're a former deputy leader of the House. Behave in a statesmanlike manner. Order! Let's hear the questions and the answers. Mr. Nigel Huddleston.
We quite rightly spend quite a lot of time in this place talking about crime and criminals and prisons, but perhaps we don't spend enough time talking about the victims of crime. So I warmly welcome the government's announcement this week of a victims strategy. But can the Prime Minister assure me this will not be some kind of dry document, but a genuine effort to boost support for the victims?
I did look at this. It seemed a bit dry. Yeah. I kind of got it. But then I always wondered why we do have a lot of systems in place to help victims, but it does seem like a lot of them do exist solely to fob people off. That's how I looked at it anyway.
Prime Minister!
I want the Scottish guy. Let's move on to the Scottish guy. Where's McGrumpyface? Ah, there he is. Right.
Age of their interaction with the justice system. And I'd like to commend my right honourable friend the Justice Secretary, but also my honourable friend the member for Charnwood for the work they put into this victims strategy.
And Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A decade on from the financial crisis, the poorest in our society are still paying a price. The bankers were bailed out, but ordinary people paid the bill. IFS and...
Oh, fuck's okay. A lot of people were punished. I like that. I know it's been 10 years, but you really have to sort of say you've got to accept who was to blame for this. I mean, a lot of people do say it was Bush and Blair, but if I remember correctly, it could be traced back as far as Clinton. If I remember correctly, wasn't that who was originally to blame for that shit? I know a lot of people didn't support austerity. I really do. But I was one of those people that did. I thought it was the only legitimate option available. They tried printing money, for fuck's sake. They tried everything, it didn't work. They brought about their own sort of demise, and the Labour Party certainly did, their party's demise. They were going to lose to Cameron, they were guaranteed it. And I think they knew they were going to lose because, oh my god, some of the crap that Labour were doing with money, it was just ridiculous. Spend. It was reckless. Which surprised me that they didn't keep some of the services that end up getting privatised, because we couldn't maintain them because we didn't have the money. But they borrowed billions just to pay for pet projects that didn't work.
Analysis shows that real wages are on average £800 lower. A decade on, and people are poorer. Indeed. A damning indictment of the UK government's leadership. Indeed. Tell us, Prime Minister.
Oh, he's wearing barley as well. He's a barley boy. Is he Barley Batty Boy, perhaps?
Why have you abandoned millions of families, those just about managing?
The right honourable gentleman, what we've done is created an economic environment where 3.3 million people are in work. We now see the number of children in workless households at the lowest level ever. We now also see what we have done is we've increased the national living wage. We have ensured that we've taken 4 million people out of paying income tax altogether. Over 30 million people have received a tax cut. That's what this government's been able to do by a balanced approach to the economy, keeping taxes low, putting money into public services and reducing our debt.
Thank you for explaining that, Dibula. I did wonder if during the time of Obama that might happen again now. And to King Chup Specialist Arrogant, you're watching some annoying bitch, me, talk about British politics, because it's all I have. Okay, I'm bored. I mean, I've got 5 more minutes to kill, so you get to suffer if you want to stay for 5 more minutes before I have to go to Cognitive Thought stream. Yeah.
Ian Blackford.
That, I'm afraid, simply ignores the reality that people are poorer. It's been the worst decade for wage growth in over 200 years. Households are struggling, and the no-deal Brexit is reported to increase the annual cost of living for low-income households by hundreds of pounds. Yet this Prime Minister...
The numbers he's deriving for that actually don't quite stack up with cost of living in different regions, because where he's deriving his numbers from, those studies weren't conducted in those areas. The sample size, I think, was 9,000, and it was from a few different areas, but it was from areas that were more expensive than where he lives anyway. And I don't mean his parliamentary residence, I mean the one up in Drunkville.
Minister still wants to walk off the Brexit cliff edge. The Prime Minister is unfit to...
It's not a case of walking off a cliff edge, Bellend. Oh, and I just want to throw this in now before I forget. I assume in your house you have lots of stacks of paper, so many, many reams of paper that you touch up every fucking day. Are you a paperphile? Do you like to fuck paper?
Govern. She's incapable of leadership. We know it. Her backbenchers know it.
Everyone knows that. It's not some big deal. She's a shit Prime Minister. It's only a matter of time before Boris makes an attempt at her seat. It's inevitable.
And the country knows it. 10 years after the economic crash, and the poorest are still bearing the brunt. Mr. Speaker, it's as simple as this. The Prime Minister should end her austerity programme or admit that her party is unfit for government.
Okay, as far as the austerity thing goes, as far as I was aware, austerity did in fact end after the most recent budget, which I remember listening to. More money was being invested in housing than it had been in several years, in fact. So I'm not entirely sure if austerity is still a thing or not. I don't believe it is, because now we have a budget surplus, which we haven't had in a decade. So now that we're finally in a position where we can spend money that we have, yeah, we should start investing in things. But we couldn't beforehand, and you know why. And he did say, he may as well have said cliff edge, but I think he actually said cliff edge, as some kind of scaremongery dog shit for the supposed 60-40 chance that we will not get a deal for Brexit. But as the EU have recently announced, Michel Barnier has more wiggle room with regards to what can and cannot be agreed upon, because the EU are equally scared of us crashing out. It's not ideal, really, for anyone to crash out. And as far as this idiot goes, oh dear. He's useful for one thing, and I wish the camera would pan down so you get to see a good view of him fiddling with the paper. Based on how he touches that paper, I think he spoons at night. I think he's the little spoon as well.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he mentions the question of Brexit. And of course we are working to get a good Brexit deal for the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland. And can I suggest to the right honourable gentleman that he might listen to the views of the Scottish NFU, who said this week that the plan that the government has put forward...
Checkers is a load of shit.
...is something that certainly the agriculture and food and drink sectors can work with.
Because then they'd have to maintain their standards to EU standards, because that's fair. We don't maintain our own standards, no, we'll just abide theirs. Yeah. And abide them when they change them in the future, with no say on how they change them. Sounds fair to me, said no one.
And that politicians from all sorts of parliaments and assemblies should actually get behind it.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. And look at that, we're done. Fuck it. Look at that face. That's the face of a man who's... He's got a piece of barley stuck up his bottom. He's sitting very, very uncomfortably on it. I think we're done with that, because I can't be bothered. Oh, no, that one. There it is. Right. Now, I agreed at 10 o'clock I would be going on Cognitive Thoughts stream, and we're going to be talking about something. I think it's going to be Serena Williams, I believe. If he's still in the chat, he could share the link, but if he's not, I will go and get it. It's not there. Fucking hell, Cog! Doesn't matter. His stream channel name, though, I can put in the chat. So if you are at all interested in going there and listening to that, there it is. tomorrow at around the same time, maybe at 9:30 instead, because I kind of want to rest a bit tomorrow. I'm going to be streaming here with Trups. Oh, you're here. If you want to shill your stream thing, put it in the chat. Trups and I will be doing a political recap, and I think what we're going to do, because instead of covering various different subjects from America and here, we're going to focus predominantly on articles 12 and 13, is it? 11 and 13, 12 and 13. I'm going to spend the day reading it, and I'm going to find some voting information as well, because I want to know who voted again, because obviously the first time we got to see who did vote for it and against it. Of the 15 members, I believe, was it 23 and only 20 voted or something? I know Hungary don't have any voting rights, so it should be interesting. Yeah. So if you're interested in listening to Carg and I chat about Serena's fucking meltdown because it's hilarious, join us there. Thank you all very much for joining me, and have a lovely evening.